Hi everyone, it's Sarah Gallardo back with Resilience Rooted. You know what, you guys? I know that I talked a lot about this show being different and this show being more vulnerable, this show being just my authentic self, bringing all of whatever's going on to the table and talking about it. I talk about relocating. I talk about having moved from one state to another and how that has affected, my life, whether good or bad. Although, having moved, I've been in this new place for about 6 months. And today I found out about the third death back home. And this was a particularly close person in my life, someone who I was around for a very long time, whose family I became very close with. And so all of this has been really heavy. Like I said, this being the third passing in the last 6 months, I found myself feeling numb today, just emotionally numb, kind of checked out. And I did the things that I was supposed to do throughout my day. I was as on schedule as I could be. This show is airing 15 minutes after it normally would have. But as I started to think about what should I do? Should I cancel? Should I go on? Should I rush? I had to remind myself to put my words into practice and to give myself grace and to cut myself slack, just like I suggest that all of you do. All of us survivors out there, we are just doing our very best. And I want to talk a little bit today about moving forward, what that looks like for survivors in particular, especially when we feel like sort of walking skinned knees. I used to describe myself as feeling like a walking skinned knee all the time. It was just so close to fragile or frail. I was very close to raw and showing up, knowing that I've done my best. These people are stepping into grief, and I feel like I carry grief with me every single day. And it's something I manage, and it's something that I work through. And I guess it depends on what's going on and how I'm feeling from day to day, how severe those emotions are. But I really want to bring some of this to the forefront and have a conversation about it. In addition, I am so grateful and so very blessed to have a guest with us this evening for Resilience Rooted, my dear friend, Gloria Masters, who is from New Zealand and has an organization called Handing the Shame Back. So I'm going to introduce Gloria now. Hi, Gloria.
Whoa, how lovely to see you, Sarah.
Thank you. It's always so lovely to see you. And I want everyone to know also that my cat, Socks, is on the table here with me. So we might see a tail go by. I hope that doesn't bother anyone.
We love socks.
I love socks too. So I wanted to, Gloria, I'm not sure if you could hear anything I was discussing before.
Yes.
Okay, great. And I think it would be great just to get your perspective on what it feels like to be a survivor living with these daily challenges, some worse than others. And anywhere in the spectrum, I think grief and loss being one of the more difficult.
Yeah. And look, I think that's great. So really happy to contribute. So Sarah, to contextualize may be helpful. So I'm a survivor of 16 years of sexual, physical and psychological abuse / torture, and I've managed to emerge through all of that. But there were many times when it felt really dispiriting, and that grief and that loss was just never far from where I was.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like it was a visitor that had overstayed its welcome. So I think, you know, for me, as I'm listening to you talk today, first of all, thank you so much for bringing your authentic self. It's beautiful.
Thank you for being part of this evening. And, you know, I keep saying I'm not going to cry. I might cry. And that's, I think, part of this too, is realizing we are all human beings.
Yes. Yes.
Neither you nor I ever come to the table saying we are above anyone else. I think part of our message is that we are all the same. We understand where other survivors are coming from. We've been there. We are them. We are survivors too.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, I think too, the work that you're doing in this space, Sarah, is such a light for people. But I love the authenticity. And look, I think for me, you know, grief isn't far from me this time of year. And I understand, you know, what you're saying with this. I think because it's Christmas and because it's a holiday season, that can feel really triggering.
Mm-hmm.
And for me and for some of us, we were more accessible to the people that wanted to hurt and abuse.
Yeah.
So that it's not always the happy, magical for family members, you know, mum and dad, 2 kids. It's not the experience or the reality for a lot of our survivor family. Right. And I think we need to honour that. So grief is can be difficult.
Yeah, definitely.
I can struggle with that. Yeah.
And I think too, just coming, you know, I definitely want to hear, you know, you tell us as much as you feel comfortable.
Sure.
Again, you know, from one person who shares their, you know, intimate survival story as a way of shining a light in a dark place. Yes. I completely understand that, you know, you are one of those people too, and that through our vulnerability and through our sort of full disclosure, you know, close to full disclosure policy, we feel that we are helping others. So first of all, I just want to thank you for being one of those people, and thank you also for shining a light in a dark place, Gloria.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So now you mentioned being a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, psychological abuse, and you used the word torture. I consider myself a wordsmith. So I love words, and I understand the power of words, and the word torture is very clear and it is very powerful.
Yes.
So first of all, I am so sorry that happened to you. And I'm wondering if you can tell us, to the level of your comfort, more about some of the things that you considered torture.
Sure. So I was born into a family basically to be sex trafficked, and one of the ways that my father and his mother, my grandmother, did that was to lock me into a room and teach me how to provide sexual services for men, women, groups, etc. I was 5 years old. So the absolute fear and the manipulation that came with that meant that I was leased to many groups. So I was leased to gangs in New Zealand from the age of 11, I was leased to gangs. I was leased to Freemasons every month. I've experienced SRA, satanic ritual abuse. I star in over 100 child exploitation - pornographic movies. I had, the list goes on, but I had many forced abortions. My grandmother performed on me. And basically the torture really existed for me between the ages of 11 and 12 and a half, when I was left in my father's care. So my mother left and took my sisters with her, and I was left with my father and brother. And during that time, Sarah, I was made to kneel on the floor, and I would be stripped naked, and I would have a dog collar put around my neck, and I would be dragged around the house, and I was not allowed to speak. The only way I could communicate was using dog language. So it was barking, howling, whining, panting, doing all the dog things. Not allowed to speak. I was not allowed to eat. And if I did, I had to do it like a dog would. So off the floor, etc. So that's an example of the torture. Yeah.
Now, first of all, to say I'm sorry that you experienced that, I think would not say exactly how remorseful I am that you experienced that. And I think what's important about you sharing this story is that, and this is something that happened for me too, when I also experienced childhood sexual abuse.
Yeah.
And when I hear you tell these such difficult details, I think what it does is allow for others to accept the truth of what happened to them. I think as childhood sexual abuse survivors, we have this inherent want or need to tell ourselves that didn't happen. It wasn't that bad. I've imagined this, almost compartmentalized to the point where we can disbelieve our own truths. And I think that's a protective measure that we have, but I think it's also entirely unfortunate. And of course, the abusers benefit from our silence, right?
Yes. Well, it's all exactly as you say, and it's that Darvo technique, because if they can Darvo us, which is deny, attack, reverse the order, victim, offender, guess what that cleverly does, Sarah? That makes us wrong, as you just said, second guessing, and doubting our own sanity.
Yes.
So they win and the narrative continues.
And if you remember from when I told my story on your show, which you can find on YouTube, folks, by the way, at Handing Your Shame Back, if you are interested. I did share the link before, but when I was on your show, I talked a lot about my father saying that I was crazy. I was diagnosed as bipolar, even though I am not bipolar, put on many medications. And there I was, silent, comatose, like a zombie. So the system itself took part in my victimization.
Well, the narrative is not palatable. Right. So we have to wonder why, don't we? So your truth and my truth, and, you know, Sarah, it's taken me decades to reach a place of healing and I guess power to come back with truth. Truth is transparent. Truth is obvious. And it's much more powerful than the lies. It will always withstand the test of time. And I think what happens, though, for our beautiful survivors, once you've been Darvoed, it's very unlikely that you will want to speak out again. Right. Because, as you and I just discussed, being shut down when you're vulnerable doesn't encourage you to ever try that again.
Exactly.
So it's, you know, for any survivor who finds any courage to speak, nothing but full kudos and heartfelt thanks to you, you know.
Exactly. Now, I am curious, and so please forgive me if I ask any questions that you don't feel comfortable answering. As always, please just say I don't feel comfortable. And of course, for anyone listening, if you feel triggered, please feel free to reach out to myself or Gloria. I will share her information if that's okay. If anyone reaches out and would like to speak with her, we are both resources to help. But my question is, in your experience, in your opinion, can you describe for us some of the symptoms? How did that experience or these experiences affect you psychologically, not only as a child, of course, as a teen, but in your adult years as well?
Think complete, chaotic, disintegrated, psychological wreck.
Yeah.
I was so false. Some people turn to drugs and alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Some people become suicidal. Oh, yes, I attempted suicide 3 times as a child as well. There's it's all in the book. But the point is, Sarah, I was such a mess. And actually, surprisingly, I'm glad I was. Because all it did was validate and confirm for me that something was terribly wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I got so adept at putting on a false self through all my childhood and teenage years. I couldn't escape the abuse until I turned 16. But once I did, you've got to remember, I spent 16 years being this false, play acting, happy, smile for everybody, because that would get more money for my father. You see, he made a lot of money out of trafficking me.
And so if he made more money, did he treat you, I don't want to use the term better, did he treat you less badly?
No. So I'd love to say that, you know, at other times, or when I wasn't being sexually abused or mistreated, or I was beaten up very badly by one of the gangs I was leased to. But to be honest, I never once in all my 16 years had a conversation with my father, ever.
You never spoke with your father?
The only time he would speak to me was to demand something, and it was usually on sexual activity or tell me what to do. He never once asked me anything. He never once gave me guidance. He never once showed me kindness. He was a psychopath, Sarah, I guess.
He wasn't a parent, he was a pimp.
He was a pimp and I was an object. So he was a psychopathic, narcissistic terrorist. And if he was alive today and the police had enough evidence against him, he would never see the light of day. So this was a monster. And, you know, to say I'm so grateful I made it through, I can't describe that enough. I thought I was going to die many times because it wasn't just the abuse and the torture. I mean, things like, Sarah, he would lie me down on the driveway and tell me he was going to run me over with the car and that I couldn't move. I mean, this is a sort of deranged psychopathology he showed. My mother was a complex narcissist, so I didn't factor in her life at all unless I was providing for her. So think parentified child. I was the child looking after her. that was the only way I got kindness or any attention from my mother. But again, my father made a great deal of money, and I was, you know, just very, very damaged, traumatized
You
child.
mentioned that you have sisters.
Well, I unfortunately can't really talk about them legally,
Okay.
but yes, so I have no connection with any living person in my family at all, because apart from being Darvoed, they're also gatekeepers and enablers, in terms of they never wanted this to see the light of day. So I've lost my whole family as a result. But to be fair, they didn't deserve me. Now, isn't that a lovely thing for me to say? They did not deserve me, Sarah.
Yeah.
Isn't it powerful for a survivor to say, I don't own this, I reject that? Yeah.
The work, Gloria, that it takes to get yourself to the point where I believe that you believe those words.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter if anyone else believes it when you say it. It matters that you believe it. And first of all, I think it's miraculous. And I am so proud of you and so honored to have you here telling us this part of your story. And I think what's so important is for others to understand that this emotional work, this healing journey, this can happen. There are survivors of so many different kinds of adversity in this world. And so this is not necessarily limited to people who have experienced childhood sexual abuse. We talk about domestic violence. There are people who have survived, you know, terrible things in their life. And I think at the crux of it all, what we have to realize is that you and I and everyone else, we are all human beings with a finite capacity for resilience. So resilience rooted, right? And what you can withstand, someone might not be able to. And so not to necessarily compare stories, but to identify and to find some common ground in this, because the point of it all is to realize we are all strong, we are all capable, and we are all worthy of the kind of beautiful healing that you are showing us right now.
Yeah. And look, I love it that you've said that. So bless, thank you. I believe that comparative suffering is such a waste of time. I'm trying to put it nicely, but I can't. I'm just going to be honest. What a waste. Because, Sarah, to be honest, you may have had one experience, or you may just have felt trapped. It doesn't matter. The point is what you experienced impacted you. Right. And that's what we've got to remember. Exactly. Yes, I had to go through, you know, possibly one of the worst cases of child abuse ever. But look at what I'm able to do now, and that's to help others by shining a light on this, because there's hope. And
I am curious now, just as someone who comes from a similar place as you. And there are times, I mean, I don't have to ask you, I know that you have PTSD. You have complex PTSD. Of course you do. Yes. I do.
Yeah.
As someone who has experienced these horrific events in life, as someone who has PTSD and deals with the symptoms on a daily basis, I'm sure, as do I, do you think that you could do any number of jobs, or do you think that your experience has made it so that you've settled into this niche, albeit regrettable, of course, your experience, it's almost, oh gosh, and I hate to use the term groomed, because I know that grooming is also something that abusers do, but this experience has almost in another way groomed you for this beautiful life of strength and shining a light in the world.
Yeah. And look, I hear what you're saying, bless. You never have to try and find words with me, Sarah. Just say it as you see it. Sarah speaks up. Look, to be honest, what I'm about to say may shock you, but I speak from love and truth. There's a reason I've gone through everything I have. And a very wise therapist said to me once, do you really think you endured 16 years of horror to then do nothing with it? So it is my absolute pleasure and privilege to be doing this work. This is my purpose in life. I wish I was funded to do it, because I have to work as well, as I'm sure you do, Sarah. But the point is, I will never stop doing this work, and I will always, always have a heart and advocacy for survivors, because I believe they're very special.
Yes, agreed. And you're bringing up another good point, which is, we are human beings in the world who also have to pay our own bills. And yes. Books don't write themselves. Books yes. don't publish themselves. Graphic designers don't gift you, book covers. Nobody is, sort of funding this mission. And we need help with administrative work. We need creative directors. We
yes.
need people behind the scenes. And so that's also a way for people to show up to support your mission and to support my mission. If anyone out there is listening and you would like to volunteer, I'm just going to put that out there into the universe. And, if anyone out there is listening and you would like to fund, please reach out to myself and or Gloria and let us know that you are interested. Of course, these kinds of things are so important, but you're right. I mean, we do still have to work. We do still experience these adversities in life. Circling back to the beginning when I was talking about, going to funerals and dealing with grief, dealing with loss, and showing up already carrying so much. We carry so much. And that's, I think, something else that's not spoken of enough, is that we come to the table sort of war-torn in all our made up, shining, gorgeous glory, right? We still have these invisible battles that we deal with on a daily basis. And so not only to validate your struggles and to validate mine, but anyone and everyone who is listening out there, to validate yours as well. We see you. We understand. Gloria, I'm wondering if, and I'm not sure if you're at liberty to speak about this either, what have your adult relationships looked like? And not necessarily romantic, in whatever capacity. How have your adult relationships been affected by your childhood experiences?
Yes, so that's a really good question. Thank you. I managed to attract to me 2 marriages, because you have to test, don't you? So I just wanted to confirm, and of course those men were reflective of my father, because we have a psychological template above our heads: bring me what I'm comfortable with. So there was no way I could bring healthy, beautiful soul, kind, compassionate, hold space for me into my world. So with all respect to my ex-husbands, that was what I pulled into me. And so what that meant was, obviously it was dysfunctional. Clearly I needed to do that. And it helped me to learn. And I'm grateful for those experiences, Sarah, because it showed me what I don't want and what isn't right for me. So isn't that a positive way of saying that?
Gloria, I'm so glad you brought this up, because I've spoken in the past about having parents who, during my childhood years, didn't teach me any of the characteristics that I wanted to repeat. I only learned what I did not want to and do, right?
Yeah.
And that as an adult, we actually learn what we want and what we need by process of elimination. And I'm going to tell you something, that is a sharp learning curve.
That's a very sharp learning curve. But again, I don't tend to, I've got a little bit older and wiser, and I've learned self-compassion, and I've learned to kind of have a sense of humor about me and the shit show that was my adult life, because what else could I expect? And then it validated and vindicated, yes, this is what happens when you go through this type of trauma. And it went on for so many years. I'm very grateful to be here today. I'm very grateful to have emerged. And I'm really happy. And I'm healed. And I don't really have that many struggles anymore. I tend to, I think the journey is always going to be ongoing, but I welcome what I need to still learn and overcome and grow from.
I love that.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could share anything about what works for you now in terms of a therapeutic process or a therapeutic release. And I'll use myself as an example. I know that throughout my childhood, singing was my passion. And so that for me was an artistic expression, but it was also a way for me to feel seen. If I'm performing on a stage, everybody has to look at me. And for a child who felt unseen, misunderstood, overlooked, something like that was an invaluable experience.
Yeah.
And then as I grew older, I began to write. I did dance for a bit, water, swimming, anything to do with water. Those are all part of my emotional cleansing process or my release process. So can you tell us a little bit about what works for you?
Yeah, so it's interesting. And another great question, by the way, I think my two go-tos are always exercise and meditation. And exercise, like this morning, it's just a lovely walk in the fresh air. It might be 25 minutes, it might be an hour, but depending on what I can fit in. But it always lifts and shifts me. I never come home regretting that I didn't take that time, because it releases those natural endorphins into the system, and then I just feel great. I can eat what I want now. So there's that. And then the other is meditation. And that has got to be the single most powerful thing that has changed my whole life.
So here's a question about meditation then, or from one survivor to another. Was there a point during your meditation practice where you felt terrified to be sort of alone in your own head?
I don't know that I was conscious of it, Sarah, but definitely up until I realized what had happened to me, because I had I'd repressed memories for a lot of years. So up until I remembered, all I knew was, looking back in my, from teenage years up until early 30s, I just had to keep moving. I just had to keep doing things. I had to keep moving. I was rushing around from thing to thing to thing. Now I know I was running. I was running from this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, that's exactly what happened. It was hugely avoidant, but it was conscious, if that makes sense.
Right.
Now when I find that, I know, what am I doing?
Yep.
What am I not dealing with?
You've come to learn your own red flags.
Yeah.
So, in a way too, for example, when I talked a little bit about me feeling numb today after receiving the news that the person had passed away, and knowing that me feeling numb is number one, it goes hand in hand with my dissociative tendencies from my childhood sexual experience, trauma. And also, hand in hand with my domestic violence experience. By now, I'm 41 years old. I have a very well-oiled dissociative tendency, and right? It's great.
It's a machine.
It's a machine. It just works on its own. So even if I wanted to opt out of it, there are times when I simply can't. But you know what? I don't feel sad about it because I don't feel anything. What are you going to do with it? And so knowing that that's a red flag for you, for me, for whoever's experiencing those things, to say, and I have done, I've had a conversation today with someone in my life, and I said, I am feeling numb today. This is a red flag. I'm not saying I'm going to hurt myself. I'm not saying I'm feeling suicidal. What I'm telling you is that I know myself well enough to know that if I let the floodgates open, that's dangerous. If I ignore the numbness, that is also dangerous. So I'm like, ding, 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 ring the bell. This is happening, and let someone else witness that with me. And just using this as an example of one way we survivors, knowing ourselves well enough, can help to navigate some of the quicksand of life, if you will. Sorry, that was a tangent.
No, 100%. And I think we're creatures of habit. So I guess what I would say is this: when you notice that you're doing something, whether it's, reaching for something to stuff into your mouth, or whether it's you're reaching for that third or fourth drink, or whether it's that you can't keep still, there's something that's needing your attention. So red flags for us are all quite unique. And I think it's just a matter of being kind, being gentle, and recognizing that actually that red flag, I've noticed that before in me, what's actually going on for me, and trying to understand it with love and compassion. Is so powerful. But equally, and I do this a lot, Sarah, and I think it's really powerful, I turn everything that could be seen as a hangover from that childhood trauma into a validation. I went through that. Wow, how amazing I have come through. So I validate, because again, it's truth knocking at the door. So how I reframe it, I'm grateful to it.
Oh, that's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I had to just take it in as you were talking and sort of give myself a moment, because, I too struggle with, I think we almost have unrealistic expectations for our own ability to power through.
Yeah.
Because what we experienced from a very young age was so ridiculously, abhorrently, god-awfully terrible that we're like, oh, this is not, we think it's no big deal in comparison. But I think what we also don't give ourselves enough credit for is that I think a lot of times these things can be cumulative. Unless you're working through them actively on a daily basis or weekly, however that works, you can bring all that pain with you. And for some people, it's one experience that just breaks the camel's back, and the floodgates open and everyone around you is like, oh, you just have a flat tire. What's the actual problem? And you're bringing decades of trauma and weight, you know? So I think it's important to do exactly what you said, to validate our experiences, to give ourselves grace and have compassion for who we are, for what we do, and for everything that we've come through.
Well, it's interesting, and I really believe it. And look, is it easy? No, it takes a bit of discipline, and it takes us being able to love ourselves unconditionally. You know, I had an eating disorder for years, and partly because, you know, I was starved. I was deliberately starved, so I would stay looking underweight and underage for the pedophiles who would pay enormous amounts of money. So I was starved for so long that food became a real issue for me. And, you know, even in the last few years, there's times when that could easily flare up again. And what I have to do is remind myself, you know, I'm a survivor that went through what is unimaginable. And how amazing is it that I recognize that that is just a hangover and that I'm safe now? And again, that it's there to validate my experience. Exactly. So I'm trying, my resilience is turning things that are reminders and triggering into a way I can manage it and give self-love and self-compassion. Because I think as survivors, I think that's one thing we really struggle with. And I'm here to say beautiful, all survivors, just beautiful, men and women.
And I think too, and I say this to many of my clients, you don't pick up where your abuser left off.
Oh, I like that.
Do you like that?
I love that.
So, you know, I've got a couple genius moments. They're few and far.
Sarah.com.
Exactly. Just ask Sarah. Don't pick up where your abuser left off, meaning the voice in her head oftentimes takes on the persona, even sometimes the sound or the face of our abuser. And if not worse than that, it takes on our own voice. On our own face.
Yes.
And we think we are the ones who are telling us, keep going, you're not good enough, you have to give more, you have to do more, that's not acceptable. You know, of course everyone's judging you, and whatever that, excuse my French, whatever that asshole in your mind is saying. And I say no to that. Let's do the work and not pick up where our abuser left off. And I love the fact that you used the word resilience. Gloria, thank you so much. We are approaching 45 minutes. So I want to a little bit wind down, but I want to talk about resilience, because I know this must have been said to you, and it was definitely said to me, oh, you're so resilient all the time. You're so resilient. And on its face, it feels and sounds like such a compliment. But in the back of my mind, I always thought to myself, I so very badly wish that I didn't have to be. And I think that's why I chose the name Resilience Rooted, because yes, resilience is important, but being rooted is also equally important. Being grounded, being certain, being validated, all of those things are equally important. And I just want to share those thoughts. Gloria, thank you so much for being here this evening. Well, I'm sorry, this afternoon for you in New Zealand. This is evening in New England. But I want to thank you. And I'm wondering if you can share with the viewers a little bit about how to contact you, about your project, about your book, whatever you feel like sharing.
Certainly. So look, I've got it right here if that's okay to show you.
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah. So this is the book, Flight Path to Healing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect.
A guide for child sexual abuse survivors. And I've been told it's really quite valuable. It gives insights and ways to manage what's emerging in you as a survivor. And each chapter has a theme, and at the end of each chapter is a beautiful mantra that you can actually pull out of the book. It's perforated.
I love that.
And they can be removed. And the whole book is a flight path theme. So as you pick up the book, it's a working guide, Sarah. So there's exercises for people to do. They fill in as they go through the book. And the very last, this is my favorite part of the book. The very last page is your passport to board the plane. And it's a survivor degree. And may I read what it says?
Please, please do.
It's so beautiful. This is a child sexual abuse survivor degree. This passport entitles the traveller to live the rest of their life in peace and harmony. This cannot be returned, refunded, or exchanged. The bearer has waited a lifetime for this trip.
Gloria, I want to read one comment that I can see, and from one of our viewers this evening. It's Diane, and I'm wondering if you can give her just a little bit of, if you can respond to this. Diane says, "My heart is breaking as I listen. I'm 61 and just beginning to try to heal. I don't know if I can."
Well, my response is, Diane, because you're here and you're following Sarah and what she offers, you are beginning to heal. So you don't even have to try. It's within you. It's emerging. You're always heading to healing. And I think the book I just showed you, I mean, Sarah, you'll put the links up, I imagine, is available on Amazon and gloriamasters.com. But really just listen to your instinct, trust your instinct, because it never leads you down the wrong path.
I agree, definitely. Yes. Thank you so much, Gloria. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for the work that you do in the world, especially as someone who also has to do work in the world. And we are just here trying to shine a light in a dark place. Thank you so much for being you. I value you as a person, as a human, as a friend. And so thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you being here.
Oh, love to you. Thank you so much.
All right. If anyone has any questions and you want to message me on the Sarah Speaks Up Facebook page, please feel free to do so. We are, we are taking questions and providing links to Gloria's work. And if you feel triggered, please follow up with someone as needed, whether that's messaging or calling a friend. Sending love, light, and blessings to everyone out there. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will see you next week.